It starts, as these things often do, with a quiet house and the illusion of safety. You were sitting in the living room, the lamp on the side table casting long, warm shadows against the bookshelves, the television flickering with some late-night show you weren't really watching. It was a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. The kind of night that feels suspended in amber, heavy with silence but comfortable. You had a cup of tea on the coaster, steeping slowly. The world outside was dark, the windows blind with black glass, reflecting only your own tired face back at you. You were alone. Or you thought you were. That is the trick of it, isn't it? The comfort of solitude is fragile. It relies entirely on the assumption that the space behind you is empty. Then, you felt it. That primal, biological tingle at the base of your spine. The hair on your arm stood up, not from cold, but from a sudden, inexplicable sense of presence. You didn't hear anything. Not at first. But the air in the room shifted. The pressure dropped. It felt like the moment before a thunderstorm, that heavy, electric static that tastes like copper on the back of your tongue. You paused. You held your breath. You waited for the house to settle, for the pipes to clank or the floorboards to creak, but there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, a sound that usually signifies safety in domestic life, but now sounded like a mechanical breath. You turned your head. Just a fraction. Just enough to see the darkened rectangle of the hallway leading toward the bedrooms and the bath. And there, at the very edge of the light-s reach, you saw the shape. It was low to the ground. 4 legs. A tapering snout. The silhouette was unmistakable. It was your dog, Barnaby. You felt a wash of relief so potent it almost made you dizzy. Of course. It was just the dog. You had forgotten he was sleeping in the hallway. You smiled to yourself, turning your gaze back to the television, feeling foolish for your sudden spike of adrenaline. You reached a hand down toward the floor, expecting the familiar, wet slide of a nose against your palm, the rough tickle of a tongue. You wanted to scratch that favorite spot behind his ears, the one that made his leg thump rhythmically against the floorboards. But your hand touched only the carpet. Dust and fibers. You froze. You looked back at the hallway. The shape was still there. It hadn't moved. You called out to him, your voice sounding thin and brittle in the heavy air. Barnaby? You expected a perk of the ears. A tail wag. A sleepy yawn. You expected the clumsy, joyful scramble of paws on wood as he came to greet you. But the shape in the hallway did not move. It stood perfectly still. And in that stillness, the first true thread of unease began to weave itself into your chest. Barnaby is a golden retriever. He is clumsy, loud, and filled with a chaotic, panting love. He does not do stillness. Even when he sleeps, he twitches. He whines. He dreams of chasing things through tall grass. But this thing, this silhouette was rigid. It was statuesque. It was holding itself in a posture of rigid, unnatural discipline. You stared at it, and the longer you looked, the less it looked like a dog and the more it looked like a thing wearing a dog's shape. You stood up. The movement felt slow, like you were moving through water. You needed to turn on the overhead light. You needed to banish the shadows that were playing tricks on your mind. You told yourself it was just a trick of the eye. The way the hall light from the bathroom was casting a distortion. You reached for the switch on the wall. Click. The room flooded with harsh, yellow light. You blinked against the sudden brightness. You looked back at the hallway. The shape was gone. But the door to the backyard was open. The realization hit you like a bucket of ice water. The back door was unlocked. The deadbolt was thrown back, the knob turning slowly in the draft. Barnaby must have pushed it open. He must be out in the yard. He probably saw a raccoon or a deer. He was probably barking his head off at the edge of the woods. You felt a surge of annoyance, masking the fear that was still clawing at your throat. You walked toward the door, your socks making no sound on the tile. "Barnaby," you called out, stepping onto the porch. "Come here, boy." The night air was biting. It smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves. The yard was bathed in the pale, sickly glow of the moon. The grass looked gray, like an overexposed photograph. You scanned the perimeter. You looked toward the tree line, where the darkness of the woods seemed to press against the boundary of your lawn like a physical weight. "Barnaby," you shouted again. Silence. The kind of silence that hurts your ears. No crickets. No distant traffic. Just the wind rustling the dry branches of the oak tree. And then, from the darkness of the woods, you heard a sound. A bark. It was Barnaby's bark. There was no mistake about it. That specific, high-pitched yip he makes when he is excited. It came from deep within the tree line. But it sounded wrong. It sounded flat. It sounded like a recording played over a bad phone line. It echoed too much. It bounced off the trees in a way that didn't make sense. Relief warred with instinct. Your brain screamed that it was him, that he was just being stubborn, chasing something into the brush. But your gut told you to lock the door. Your gut told you that the bark was a lure. You stood on the porch, shivering. You watched the tree line. And then, you saw the eyes. 2 points of light, floating in the dark about 3 feet off the ground. They reflected the moonlight, pale and glassy. You waited for them to blink. Dogs blink. They squint. They look around. These eyes did not blink. They stared. They were fixed on you with an intensity that felt predatory. "Barnaby," you whispered. The name felt small and fragile in your mouth. The eyes moved. They drifted closer, but the rest of the shape was invisible. Just 2 floating lights in the void. Then came the sound again. Not a bark this time. It was a whine. The sound Barnaby makes when he is hurt. The sound that breaks your heart. It was a pathetic, keening noise. It triggered every caretaking instinct you had. You wanted to run to him. You wanted to scoop him up and check his paws for thorns. You took a step off the porch. "Come here, buddy," you said, your voice trembling. "It's okay." You walked onto the grass. The cold soaked through your socks immediately. You didn't care. You were focused on the eyes. They were about 20 feet away now, emerging from the shadows of the oaks. The shape followed. It was Barnaby. It looked exactly like him. The same golden fur, the same lolling tongue, the same way his ears flopped when he trotted. He came toward you, his tail wagging slowly. It was a normal wag. A friendly wag. But something was screaming at you to stop. The ancient part of your brain, the lizard brain that knows when it is being hunted, was seizing control of your nervous system. You stopped walking. You stood 10 feet from the thing that looked like your dog. Barnaby stopped, too. He sat down. He tilted his head. He looked at you with those glassy, unblinking eyes. And then, you heard it. From behind you. From inside the house. A whine. A soft, wet, pathetic whine. The exact same sound the thing in the yard was making. You spun around. The back door was still open. Through the screen door, you could see into the kitchen. And there, huddled in the corner by the refrigerator, shaking with a terror you could feel from the porch, was Barnaby.